With Week 9's primetime game versus the Colts right around the corner, we take a look at the three biggest storylines for Sunday Night Football's upcoming clash, as well as the key matchup to watch for once kickoff rolls around, as the Vikings look to get back on track after a few rough weeks to say the least. We're going to be breaking down all of that in this episode of Vikings Digest, but first make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you don't miss any updates surrounding the Vikings as we head into a pivotal game versus the Colts on Sunday night. With that, let's hop into the first topic of the day, which is three big Week 9 storylines. So one of the biggest things before we jump into the three main ones is that this is our last home game until December. We're going to be going on the road for a little bit, going against some tough teams on the road, hopefully ones that we can steal as well, but we want to make this last home game count. And someone who wants to make this game count is Cam Robinson, as he's going to make his Minnesota Vikings debut after they acquired him earlier this week to fill in for the injured Christian Darrisaw, who is unfortunately out for the rest of the season with a torn ACL and MCL. We hope nothing but the best for Darrisaw to be back on the field, hopefully at the start of next season or within the first few weeks of next season. We know that Hawkinson is coming off of a very similar type of injury, as well as Nick Chubb, where these guys took a little bit longer than a full off season to recover and get back on the field. So hopefully Darrisaw is back sooner than later. He's probably our best offensive lineman, someone that we've built this entire offensive line around so that he can make sure that this is our best guy. And Minnesota has had a history of bad offensive lines, and we finally got to a place where it was looking really good, and then injuries happened. Darrisaw, Reisner's coming back off the IR potentially this week. We're going to hop into that later on in this episode. But again, this is something where Minnesota was finally in a place where Darnold was having a lot of protection. We were getting the run game going, and now we're having these injuries on top of some defensive struggles where Minnesota just needs to do some damage control and make sure we can keep this train on the rails. Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell also noted Robinson's experience coupled with the nature of the tackle position, being his primary responsibility on waiting downs, is slowing down edge rushers, which allows for a fairly smooth transition in a new system, no matter the differences in terminology. So obviously Robinson's coming over from a situation in Jacksonville, which wasn't entirely the greatest, into a much better one in Minnesota, where he can hopefully have a much better season, be a lot happier, and hopefully help this team go on a deep playoff run and hopefully take home a Lombardi trophy. I know it's a long ways away from now. We're only at 5-2. We're coming off of 2 bad losses. So right now, we're not entirely looking like a Super Bowl team, but hopefully we can get it together so we can get to looking like that. And one of the things that we're going to have to focus on heading into this game is the Vikings defense regaining its footing. Now, since their week 6 bye, the Vikings have been gashed by the run, 125.5 yards per game, averaging 4.3 yards per carry, picked on by the pass as well with 263 yards per game and 8.9 yards per attempt, and managed 4 sacks and 2 takeaways. In his 5-0 start, Minnesota mustered around 20 sacks and forced 13 turnovers, averaging 2.6 per game. So this is very alarming, where Minnesota, since the bye week, has completely fallen off on defense almost. Yes, we were able to get a little things here and there, but you look at the numbers there. From the first 5 games, the past 2 games have been abysmal on defense, if you're thinking that way. And defensive coordinator Brian Flores said there's valuable lessons the Vikings can learn from their 2 losses. Basic communication, checking into correct alignments, limiting penalties that revive drives, understanding the minuscule margin for error, and being disciplined in the minutia within the details. One other thing that Minnesota and Brian Flores could potentially do as well, maybe don't blitz so much. We know Brian Flores likes to blitz, but we've seen within these past 3 weeks, I know we got to win against the Jets, but these past 3 weeks, we've played against veteran quarterbacks. We started the season out, Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy, and then Daniel Jones. The 4 young quarterbacks where our defense just took advantage of them completely. Then we got to Aaron Rodgers, where we got the win, but he was picking us apart a little bit. Then we get to Jared Goff. He picked us apart relentlessly. Then we get to Matthew Stafford. He picked us apart. And now we're going into a game where we thought we were playing against Anthony Richardson. Now we're playing against veteran Joe Flacco. So another veteran quarterback who's going to know how to read defenses. He knows what we're going to be throwing at him because he's seen this defense before. Maybe not these guys, but he's seen Brian Flores' defense. He knows how he can operate. He knows how he thinks. So this is going to be something where maybe we go a little conservative on the blitzes for once here, boys. Maybe we don't leave ourselves shorthanded in pass coverage coverage when Joe Flacco, when he's starting for the Colts, he has been cooking. So if we can limit those opportunities and just drop guys back in coverage, maybe try and get a takeaway from the air instead of trying to get a sack or pressure all the time, because when you blitz like that, you're always going to leave someone open. We saw it with Kyron Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown. The list goes on as far as receivers that we've left completely naked, wide open as a result of blitzing too much. And Flores did go into the defensive corrections as well, saying, it can become monotonous to set an edge over and over again when you know if you jump inside, I can make a play. I talked to our guys about the my bad plays. If you say my bad and you say my bad and you say my bad and you say my bad, you end up with 7 to 10 my bad plays. I'm not saying people have to play perfect, but I tell them that all the time. We don't have to play perfect, but we've got to play good. And what that means is doing the routine things. And Flores did also acknowledge how big of a loss it was not having Mike linebacker and green dot Blake Cashman, but he repeated the same messaging as players recently. They're embracing the next man up mentality. Cashman is 5 tackles short of the team leader Harrison Smith with 45, despite turf toe keeping him out the past 2 games. That activity around the ball was missed, but more seriously is the drop-off in Minnesota's middle of the field pass defense. Cashman is tied second on the team with 5 passes defended, as many as teammates Cameron Bynum, Shaq Griffin, Byron Murphy, that are all in the secondary. He's patient and instinctive in coverage. So yes, Blake Cashman has been a big void that this defense has been missing. This is something where we've had Kamu Grugier-Hill step in the past few games, and he's done all right, but that middle of the field hasn't been as bolstered down as it was at the start of this season. So we definitely need Cashman back as soon as possible. We're going to get into the final injury report later on in this episode so you can see what Cashman's status is going to be for Sunday. But the last thing that we're going to touch on as far as the 3 biggest storylines for this game is that last time this was an epic last meeting between these 2 teams. The last time these 2 teams met, on that day, Minnesota fell behind 33-0 in an ugly first half, which featured 4 field goals, 2 non-offensive touchdowns, and 1 pass for points by Matt Ryan. It was a gross sight for the 66,801 fans on hand at US Bank Stadium. No fault to anyone who left, but the people who stayed witnessed history. Probably the best comeback in the history of the NFL. We all know the Vikings stiffened up in the third quarter. They outscored the Colts 14-3, 22 consecutive points to tie the game with force, eventually setting up Greg Joseph for the overtime kick. The crazier notes from that game, Kirk Cousins threw a then personal best 460 yards that he just broke this past season in Atlanta, throwing 509. KJ Osborne was our top receiver, beating Justin Jefferson in yards, which doesn't really happen much. And Dalvin Cook had the exact number of receiving yards as he did rushing, as well as getting a touchdown as well. And Chandon Sullivan returned 2 fumbles to the end zone, but they were foiled by whistles. So even reading this is something where they touched on it earlier, where penalties that can revive drives is something that Minnesota wants to avoid. There was a few times in the last game that they played against the Colts where those 2 touchdowns taken off the board would have been a completely different ball game on top of the incredible comeback Minnesota had. So if Minnesota can limit those defensive penalties, the holdings, the pass interferences, the hands to the face, be smart. How you can be smart about that? When you're blitzing like that, you're going to mess up at some point. You're going to get aggressive and you're going to just get caught with your pants down on some occasions. And that's what Minnesota has to stop doing. Trust in your front 7. I know our front 7 isn't as strong as some other teams, but you don't have to always blitz to try and compensate for it, because your pass coverage is going to hurt as a result of it, especially when veteran quarterbacks are picking you guys apart. But what do you guys think are the 3 biggest storylines heading into this game? I definitely think it's the defense. I think all eyes are on Brian Flores in that defense, and as well as making sure this offense can remain consistent. But what do you guys think down in the comments? But that's going to take us to our second topic of the day, which is the key matchup for this game. And the key matchup for this game is going to be the Vikings secondary versus the Colts receiver. On Thursday Night Football, the Vikings defense struggled. Its pass rush stalled, failing to record a sack for the first time this year. It buckled on weighty downs, giving up 3 touchdowns on 3 trips to the red zone, and the secondary allowed 8 passes of 15 plus yards. This is just atrocious for Minnesota's defense. Like we said earlier in this video, the defense has not been good the past 3 weeks, and that Rams game was a very big exclamation point on that, where we need to fix some things. Maybe because we haven't been able to get through these great offensive lines, that's another reason. Stop blitzing so much. I know I keep saying it over and over and over. I said it in our last few videos too. Stop blitzing so much because we're getting picked apart. Well, it's showing. We haven't been able to get home to the quarterback. So if we're not getting home to the quarterback, Why are we blitzing so much? So that's something Minnesota definitely has to look at heading into this game. And something with the Colts receivers. Both Colts receivers, being Alec Pierce and Josh Downs, can take the top off of defense and score in a wink. Pierce has gone for 125 plus yards and a touchdown on 3 catches in 2 games already this year. And Downs went 4 catches for 109 yards and 1 touchdown in week 8. Together, they've submitted the 3 of the NFL's 34 offensive plays in 2024 that have gained 60 plus yards. Neither player, however, is wide receiver 1 for the Colts. That belongs to Michael Pittman Jr., of course. And in terms of pay of target per game, Pittman's production has decreased from a lot from last season as well, but he is still dangerous. Pittman has drawn 5+ targets in 28 consecutive games. So we know that Joe Flacco likes to air out the ball. We know that Minnesota likes to blitz. And we know that these wide receivers are deadly. They will rip off big chunk plays and then hit Pittman underneath for those little possession plays. So Minnesota is going to need to be careful. They're going to need to drop back in coverage a little bit more than they would like to, while also not allowing Jonathan Taylor to just run crazy, because we know the run game has been bad. The run defense has been pretty bad the past few weeks. So again, it also comes down to blitzing. If you're going to blitz on a run play, if you blitz the wrong hole, he's just going to break open and just be gone. That happened with Kyren Williams last week, and it happened with Jahmyr Gibbs the week before. So how do we stop the reigning rushing champion of 2021? How do we stop that? Just trust in your front 7. Don't over blitz. If you're going to blitz, make sure you're blitzing the right gap and not get burned. But what do you guys think down in the comments? What do you guys think about the wide receivers for the Colts versus this Vikings secondary? Would love to hear what you guys have to say down in the comments. But that's going to take us into our final topic of the day, which is the final week 9 injury report. So we see here on the injury report, the big one there is that Blake Cashman, unfortunately, has been ruled out after not practicing all week. We kind of saw this coming. We were hoping it wasn't going to happen, but unfortunately it did. We're going to be without him for one more game. Hopefully we can get him back within these next 2 games. We definitely need him back over the middle in that defense. And Dalton Risner, after recording full practices all week, is listed as questionable for this game. Harrison Smith and Gilmore, they got their rest days on Friday, so don't be alarmed by that DNP. But as well, the Dalton Risner is the biggest one to look at. If we can have him back for this game, that would be great. I know the Colts defense isn't overly flashy and overly scary, but again, this is something where Minnesota just needs to have all hands on deck and just get a win. It's not about getting a statement win. It's just about getting a win in general. And we're going to have TJ Hawkinson back, so hopefully that takes a little bit of pressure off of Aaron Jones and Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, opens up the game a bit more for more possibilities and more guys left open. But what do you guys think about the game on Sunday night? What do you guys think will be the final score? How are you guys liking Minnesota's chances against Joe Flacco, who is unfortunately a Super Bowl MVP and Super Bowl champion? Let us know down in the comments below. But that's going to do it for this episode of Vikings Digest. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell icon so you don't miss any of all the updates on this new channel. But that's going to do it for today's episode. I've been your host, Griffin. Take care.